Anybody know those weeks where you just feel like everything's a little bit of a burden and it's just weighing you down and your shoulders feel heavy and your body feels heavy and you just feel like, oh, how am I going to carry what I have to carry this week? Anyone have those weeks?
Yes.
No? Some do, some don't. Yes. And anybody have weeks where we feel like what we actually have to carry is somehow carrying us? Anyone have weeks like that?
Yes.
Where you feel so good and positive about what you do in the world and your relationships that you just feel like, I have all these burdens, but they're not really burdens. They're lifting me up. They're carrying me. Anyone have weeks like that? Sometimes. No. Our city council woman says definitely not. Yeah, I get it. It's hard sometimes. Life feels very overwhelming a lot of the time, and there's all kinds of emotional and spiritual and physical burdens that we carry. And carrying is, we think in Yiddish, of course, we thought of schleppers. We're just a bunch of schleppers, like carrying everything. But like this parsha is really talking about a kind of holy kind of carrying. And I think there's so much contained, as I've been hinting at all morning, in this incredible verb root. If you look it up in the dictionary, nun, sin, aleph, right? You look it up in the dictionary, it's got so many different meanings. It can mean to lift up, but it can also mean to carry, right? It can mean to put something on. It can mean to marry. It can mean a nasi is a prince or a leader or a tribe or a president. We have our nasiot, our two co-presidents of the congregation. It's all the same, that same root of nun, sin, aleph. And there just seems to me to be a lot of really important lessons that we can learn from this, because the name of the parsha, Naso, is yet again, just as we had last week, or actually it was 2 weeks ago, at the beginning of Bamidbar, this idea of se'u et rosh, of lifting up the heads. This idea that we're counting, but it's not really about counting. It's about elevating. It's about the idea that every single person counts and everybody's contributions count, right? We all, I hope, have some people in our life that whatever we're feeling, whatever we're carrying, whatever our burdens are, there are those people that just make us feel really good about who we are and what we do in the world. And some of us maybe have people that have the opposite effect, where we just kind of feel like, I can't do anything right. And like we have those relationships, right? We have those relationships. And what's so interesting about the Nesi'im, which are at the very end of the Parsha, the 12 Nesi'im, the 12 heads of the tribes, are offering their gifts to the temple, but to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle. But there's this extraordinary commentary from Kedushat Levi, the Hasidic master, Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev, an ancestor of Sarah, who says that a nasi, it's lashon nasiut, which is a language of lifting up. We think of a nasi, they're called a nasi because they have been lifted up as leaders out of the rest of the tribe, right? They have been elevated to a position of leader. But according to Kedushat Levi, the whole point of a leader is that they actually elevate the people that they're leading and make everybody feel great about themselves. And that's really true leadership. What some people call servant leadership, right? Where you're a leader, but really you're in service, and in your service you're helping all of the people who are part of whatever the organization is that you're leading feel good and important about their burdens. Right? So there's the lifting up the head, as we mentioned earlier on wedding anniversaries. There's a few wedding anniversaries coming up this week. Nisuim is also about wedding, about getting married. So yes, I think there's a way to understand that as when people get married, they somehow lift each other up, they hold each other up, they have each other's backs, so to speak, right? They elevate each other. So there are all of these different ways in which you understand that. But at the beginning of the Parsha, it's so interesting the way the different clans of the Levites, the Geshunis, and the Kahites and the Merarites, it all talks about avodam umasam, their service and the stuff that they carry, right? Because their service is the stuff that they carry. Because all of these descriptions are about what they're carrying. They're carrying, some of them are just carrying like the tent poles, right? And the pegs and the bits and pieces. And some of them are carrying the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, right? But everyone is carrying something. And these are the Levites, which are kind of one of the important tribes. And so there's this idea of avodah, of service, being joyful service, is this idea that we are joyful in whatever our burdens are, whatever we're carrying. Masa and se'u et rosh are from this same root. So it can be both the ability to lift each other up and to lift ourselves up and to really elevate ourselves as a community, but it's also the masa, the burden. Back in Parshat Mishpatim, back in the book of Exodus, one of the obligations that we have, it says, if you see your enemy's ass, your enemy's donkey, rovetz takat maso, lying on the ground from the weight of its load, maso, same word, you have an obligation to relieve that donkey of its load, right? So it's like this idea that in a sense we're all the donkey and we're all the person passing by. We all have an obligation. Part of being in community is that when we see that the load that someone is carrying is just too much and it's weighing them down and it's not making them feel joyful, we have an obligation to help lift each other up and to help ease the burden of the load. But there's another beautiful commentary that I read from the Sfat Emet, another Hasidic commentator a little bit later than Kedushat Levi, who connects the fact that the Leviim, as well as being the holy schleppers, they're the ones who are responsible for all the singing. And he says, Se'u Zimra, says the Psalms, lift up song. Se'u, same root, Se'u Zimra, and Se'u et Rosh, and the Masa, the burden that they're carrying. And the Sfat Emet's commentary, based on a midrash, is basically saying that they're so joyful in their service of what they are carrying that it makes them sing. That their song actually comes from the fact that they are doing this avodah, this holy type of service. And so it almost doesn't matter what it is they're carrying because they're so caught up in this idea that the avodah, the work, avodah is such an interesting word. I mean, an eved can be a servant, an eved can be a slave, and avodah can be worship. It's one of the words that we use for prayer, but it's also, avodah is just work, right? So it's the idea if we can transform what we perceive as being burdens, what gives us pain, what literally weighs us down into the world, and to somehow be able to elevate it to a sense of avodah, of holy work, then it makes us sing. And then at a certain point, it's not us carrying the stuff, it's the stuff carrying us. And not an easy place to get to. And I'm certainly not claiming that, I have probably more weeks where I feel weighed down than lifted up by the burdens that I carry. But I think part of being in communities together is to recognize that whether we're leaders or followers, we all have this incredible opportunity to lift each other up, right? Another place in the Parsha, another part that we didn't read, where of course we have this root, is the third line of the Birkat Kohanim blessing. Yisa Adonai panav elecha vayasem lecha shalom, right? May God's face be lifted up to us, and may we be blessed with shalom, with peace, with wholeness, integrity. However we understand shalom is not just peace, it's also shleimut, it's also wholeness. So this idea that we are inviting the presence of God to lift us up and give us a sense of peace, which is also, I think, connected to that idea of transforming our burdens into joyful service. In the Shabbat Amidah, one of the blessings that every week, and I today we did a full repetition of the Shachri Amidah, and I paid more attention to it, is V'taheh libeinu la'ovdecha be'emet, right? V'taheh libeinu, like purify our hearts so that we can find a way to serve you truthfully, right? V'taheh libeinu la'ovdecha, to serve you be'emet, in truth. And I think part of however we might understand that, and I'm sure we all have a different understanding of it, like how our hearts connect us to a type of service that makes us feel more connected to some higher truth. And that often, even if what we are doing is really important in the world, even if what we're doing is really holy and special and elevating and sacred even, there are times where it weighs us down. There are times when it exhausts us. There are times when it depletes us, and we don't know where we're going to find the resources and the energy to carry on. But something about that idea of saying, please, like, help me make my heart a little bit more pure so that I can change my relationship to the work that I'm doing in this world. So that rather than seeing myself as carrying a burden, I'm seeing myself as carrying something that is actually carrying me, and something that's carrying me in a way that I can be like one of the Levi'im, and that service can actually make me want to break out in song, and that what I carry becomes the source of my song, because I'm a holy schlepper, not just carrying and getting exhausted, but carrying and elevating myself and elevating all of those around me. So a lot of different ways to understand this incredible verb root that gives its name to this parsha, naso. Naso is about elevation. It's also about carrying. It's about connecting in a certain way. That part of lifting ourselves up is about changing our relationship to what our burdens are. The fact that the Torah obligates us, if we see our enemy's donkey weighed down by its load, we have an obligation to help, right? So, most of us aren't riding around town on donkeys, but we are walking around with a lot of burdens on our shoulders. And so if we see someone that we might even not like that much, or someone that we might even perceive as an enemy who's really overwhelmed and overburdened by what they're carrying, we perhaps have an obligation to see how we can help lift their burden and transform it so that rather than them carrying it, it's carrying them, and they can sing. V'taheh libeinu, v'taheh libeinu, v'taheh libeinu li'avdecha be'emet. V'taheh libeinu, v'taheh libeinu, v'taheh libeinu li'avdecha be'emet. V'taheh libeinu li'avdecha li'avdecha be'emet. V'taheh libeinu li'avdecha li'avdecha be'emet. Shabbat shalom.